There's a man firing a gun out of an apartment window in New York City. Below him, 150 police officers have surrounded the building. Bullets are flying in both directions. And in the middle of all this chaos, this man, a cop killer, pauses. He pulls out a piece of paper, and he starts to write. You'd expect a confession, maybe an apology. Instead, he writes this. Under my coat is a weary heart, but a kind one, one that would do nobody any harm. A kind heart, from a man shooting at police officers. His name was Two Gun Crowley, and a few weeks later when he was sentenced to the electric chair, do you know what he said? This is what I get for defending myself. Now here's the part that should stop you cold. Crowley wasn't unusual. Around the same time, Al Capone, one of the most notorious gangsters in American history, described himself as a public benefactor. A man who helped people. Dutch Schultz, another killer, said the exact same thing about himself. The warden of Sing Sing prison spent years around the most dangerous criminals alive, and he noticed something that changed how he saw human nature completely. Almost none of them thought they were bad people. Every single one had a reason, an excuse, a story where they were the good guy. And if the worst people on earth refuse to blame themselves for anything, what do you think that means for the rest of us? That question sits at the center of one of the most influential books ever written. Dale Carnegie published it in 1936. Nearly 100 years later, people are still buying it, still quoting it, still discovering that it quietly explains almost every frustrating interaction they've ever had. It's called How to Win Friends and Influence People. And by the end of the next few minutes, I think you'll see the people in your own life. Your boss, your partner, your kids, the stranger who cut you off in traffic, in a slightly different way. Because here's the uncomfortable truth Carnegie starts with. When you criticize someone, you feel like you're helping. You're pointing out what's wrong so they can fix it. It's logical, it's fair. And it almost never works. Criticism, Carnegie says, is like a homing pigeon. You send it out, but it always comes back to you. Because the moment you tell someone they've messed up, they don't think, you know what, you're right, thank you. They get defensive. They protect their pride. They start building a case for why they were right all along, and now they resent you on top of it. There's a story about Abraham Lincoln that shows just how hard this lesson is to learn, even for great people. During the Civil War, one of Lincoln's generals, a man named Meade, had a chance to end the entire war. The enemy was trapped. All Meade had to do was attack. Instead, he hesitated and the enemy escaped. Lincoln was furious, devastated. He sat down and wrote Meade a letter, pouring out all his frustration and disappointment. And then he did something remarkable. He never sent it. They found that letter among his papers after he died. Lincoln had written it, felt the anger drain out of him, and then imagined what it would actually do. He pictured Meade, exhausted, having just lived through the horror of that battle, opening a letter from his president that tore him apart. Lincoln realized it would accomplish nothing except making an enemy out of a man who was already suffering. So he set it aside. What's fascinating is that the young Lincoln wasn't like this at all. As a younger man, he loved to mock people. He'd write anonymous letters ridiculing his rivals, until one day a man he'd humiliated challenged him to a duel, an actual, potentially deadly duel. Lincoln barely avoided it, and after that, he almost never criticized anyone again for the rest of his life. Here's the same idea in a completely different setting. A test pilot named Bob Hoover was flying back from an air show when both engines suddenly died in midair. He managed to land the plane and save everyone on board barely. The cause? A mechanic had fueled his plane with the wrong fuel, a mistake that nearly killed 3 people. Imagine being that mechanic, seeing Hoover walk toward you. You'd expect an explosion of rage. Instead, Hoover put his arm around the young man who was already crying and said, "To show you I'm sure that you'll never do this again, I want you to service my plane tomorrow." Think about that. Which mechanic do you think was more careful for the rest of his career? One who'd been screamed at, or one who'd been trusted? So if criticism doesn't work, what does? This is where Carnegie hands you the master key to almost everything about human beings. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. Every person you will ever meet is starving for one thing. Not money, not comfort, a feeling of importance, the sense that they matter. The psychologist William James put it bluntly. He said the deepest urge in human nature is the craving to be appreciated. Not the wish, not the hope, the craving. It's that intense. And people will go to astonishing lengths to feed it. Carnegie tells the story of a woman whose life had fallen apart. Her marriage failed, her dreams collapsed, and reality gave her nothing to feel proud of. So her mind gave her something instead. She retreated into a fantasy where she'd married into English royalty, and she insisted on being called Lady. In her imagination, she had a new baby every single night. When a doctor was asked if he could cure her, he said something haunting. He wouldn't, even if he could. She's much happier as she is. She had found in madness the importance that life had refused to give her. That's an extreme example, but the same hunger drives everyone, including you and me. And here's the thing, most of us are surrounded by people we could feed with a single sincere sentence, and we say nothing. Consider the man who was married for 18 years. His wife once asked him to write down 6 things she could do to become a better wife. He thought about it. He could easily have listed her faults. Instead, the next morning, he had a florist deliver 6 roses to her with a note. "I love you the way you are." When he came home, she was standing at the door with tears in her eyes. Now there's a razor-thin line here that Carnegie warns about constantly, and if you miss it, everything falls apart. There is a world of difference between appreciation and flattery. Appreciation is sincere, it comes from the heart. Flattery is fake, it comes from the teeth out. One is telling someone what you genuinely admire about them. The other is telling them what you think they want to hear so you can get something. People can smell the difference, and flattery, Carnegie says, is like counterfeit money. Use it, and eventually it gets you into trouble. The man who understood this better than almost anyone was Charles Schwab, one of the first people in America to earn over $1 million a year, back when that was an unimaginable sum. He wasn't the most knowledgeable person about steel. Plenty of his employees knew more than he did. So what made him worth that much? In his own words, his ability to arouse enthusiasm in people. And how did he do it? "I am hearty in my approbation and lavish in my praise." He went out of his way to catch people doing things right. "I am anxious to praise," he said, "but loath to find fault." Now, appreciation makes people feel good. But there's a deeper skill underneath it, one that turns ordinary people into people others can't say no to. It comes down to a fishing trip. When Carnegie went fishing, he loved strawberries and cream, but he never once tried to catch a fish with strawberries and cream. He used worms, because the question was never what he wanted. The question was what the fish wanted. Obvious, right? And yet almost everyone, almost all the time, tries to catch fish with strawberries and cream. We ask for things by explaining why we want them. We try to persuade people by talking about our needs, our goals, our reasons. There's a perfect little story about Ralph Waldo Emerson, the famous thinker, trying to get a stubborn calf into a barn. He pushed. His son pulled. The calf refused to budge because both of them were only thinking about what they wanted. Then an Irish maid came along. She didn't say a word. She simply put her finger in the calf's mouth and let it suck as she gently let it inside. She thought about what the calf wanted, and the calf followed. Carnegie built one of his most important principles on this. Arouse in the other person an eager want. Show people how getting what you want helps them get what they want. Watch how a woman named Barbara Anderson used this. She needed a job at a bank in a new city. Most people write a job letter about themselves, their experience, their needs, why they'd love the position. Barbara did the opposite. She wrote about how she could help the banks grow, what she could do for them. She sent that letter to 12 banks. 11 of them invited her in for an interview. Same person, same qualifications, just a different question at the center of the letter. Not here, what I want, but here's what you want and here's how I can help you get it. And once you understand this, that people are driven by the need to feel important and moved by their own wants rather than yours, the whole art of getting along with others starts to click into place. Take being liked. Most of us try to be liked by being impressive. We tell our best stories, share our accomplishments, try to seem interesting. Carnegie says we've got it backwards. You will make more friends in 2 months by becoming genuinely interested in other people than you will in 2 years trying to get other people interested in you. The best example he gives isn't a person. It's a dog. His childhood dog, Tippy, who greeted him every single day bursting with joy, asking for nothing, offering nothing but love and attention, and in doing so became the greatest friend-maker Carnegie ever knew. The dog had figured out for free what most humans never learn. This is why listening might be the most underrated social skill on Earth. Carnegie once spent an evening with a botanist who, afterward, told everyone that Carnegie was one of the most interesting conversationalists he'd ever met. The strange part, Carnegie had barely spoken. He just listened, intently, fascinated, asking questions. That was it. To that man, being truly listened to felt so rare and so good that he mistook it for great conversation. There's a moment that captures this that's hard to shake. A little boy named Martin was in a hospital ward, alone on Thanksgiving, terrified about surgery the next day, missing his mother who was too poor and worried to be there. He lay in bed crying, and a young student nurse off duty, free to go home, saw him. She wiped his tears. She told him about her own loneliness that day. And she brought 2 dinner trays and ate Thanksgiving dinner with him, staying for hours past the end of her shift, until he finally fell asleep. That boy grew into a man who never, ever forgot her. One person, giving genuine attention to someone who felt invisible, left a mark that lasted a lifetime. And it costs nothing. A person's own name, Carnegie says, is to them the sweetest sound in any language. Remembering it, using it, spelling it right, it's a tiny act that tells someone they matter. There's a man named Nicodemus Papadoulos who wept, actually wept, when someone finally pronounced his name correctly. 15 years in a new country and no one had bothered. Now let's push into harder territory, because being liked is one thing, but what about when you actually disagree with someone? When you need to change their mind? Here's the first painful lesson. You cannot win an argument. Carnegie means this almost literally. If you lose the argument, well, you lost. But if you win it, if you prove the other person wrong, demolish their logic, leave them with nothing to say, you've still lost. Because you've wounded their pride and now they resent you. As the old line goes, a man convinced against his will is of the same opinion still. There was a salesman named Patrick O'Hare who was brilliant at arguing. He'd win every debate with his customers, and he sold almost nothing. It wasn't until he learned to stop fighting, to agree, to stop proving people wrong that he became a star salesman. He won by no longer trying to win. This is why Carnegie says to never, ever tell someone flatly, "You're wrong." Those 2 words are a declaration of war on someone's intelligence and pride. Instead, he suggests a phrase so disarming it changes the entire temperature of a conversation. I may be wrong. I frequently am. Let's examine the facts together. Benjamin Franklin credited his entire life's success to learning this. As a young man, he was so opinionated and argumentative that an old friend pulled him aside and told him the hard truth. People were starting to avoid him. It stung. But Franklin took it to heart and made a rule: he would never again directly contradict anyone. He stopped saying certainly and undoubtedly and started saying I imagine and it seems to me. He became one of the most persuasive and beloved diplomats in American history, not by being right more often, by making other people feel respected while he did it. And here's something that feels backwards but works like magic. When you're wrong, admit it fast and admit it loudly. Beat the other person to it. Carnegie learned this from a bulldog and a policeman. He'd been walking his dog without a leash, been warned once already, and then got caught again, red-handed, before the officer could say a word. Carnegie jumped in. "Officer, you've caught me. I'm guilty. I have no excuses." And the policeman, whose whole job in that moment was to assert his authority, suddenly had nothing to push against. Instead of a ticket, Carnegie got sympathy. The officer practically defended him. When you condemn yourself before anyone else can, you take away their reason to attack. There's no fight left to have. The grandest version of this comes from General Robert E. Lee after the disastrous battle at Gettysburg. Thousands of his men had died in a doomed charge. He could have blamed his generals. He could have pointed fingers in a dozen directions. Instead, he rode out to meet his broken soldiers and said, "All this has been my fault. I and I alone have lost this battle." That is the sound of a leader people would follow anywhere. There's a gentler tool, too, one Carnegie borrows from an old fable. The wind and the sun once argued about who was stronger. They saw a man walking in a coat and decided whoever could get the coat off him would win. The wind blew as hard as it could, and the man just clutched his coat tighter. Then the sun came out, warm and gentle, and within minutes the man took the coat off himself. Warmth accomplishes what force cannot. Begin in a friendly way. When John D. Rockefeller Jr. faced striking workers who literally wanted to hang him, he didn't come with threats or lawyers. He came with a warm speech about friendship and common interests, having taken the time to visit their homes and meet their families. The men who wanted him dead went back to work and became his admirers. And when you do have to correct someone, a child, an employee, a partner, Carnegie's leadership principles all protect one thing: the other person's dignity. Begin with genuine praise before the criticism, the way a dentist numbs you before drilling. Point out mistakes indirectly. Talk about your own failures first. Ask questions instead of barking orders. "What do you think of this?" instead of "do it this way." Let people save face. And above all, praise the smallest improvement because, as Carnegie puts it, abilities wither under criticism, but they blossom under encouragement. There's one story that shows what this can do, and I want to leave you with it. A boy named David was labeled brain injured. He was 2 grades behind. He couldn't multiply. He could barely read. Other kids mocked him, called him a monster. And somewhere along the way, David had accepted it. He believed he simply couldn't learn. His father refused to believe it, but he didn't do it by pushing harder or scolding him for falling behind. He did it by making learning feel easy and fun and possible. Flashcards, a stopwatch to beat his own times, and celebration, real, genuine celebration of every tiny improvement. Every small win became proof that David could do this after all. And slowly something shifted. The boy who couldn't multiply made the honor roll, then the National Honor Society. He started winning science fair prizes. His father said it simply: once David found out that learning was easy, his whole life changed. That's the entire book in one child. Not a technique, not a trick. A person seeing the good in someone and helping them believe in it too. Because that's what Carnegie insists on over and over, and it's the thing people miss when they dismiss this book as manipulation. None of it works if it isn't sincere. This isn't a bag of tricks for getting your way. It's a genuine shift in where your attention lives, away from yourself and toward the people around you. And the strange, beautiful paradox is that the moment you stop trying to make people care about you and start truly caring about them is the moment you become the kind of person others are drawn to. Everything I've shared barely scratches the surface. There are dozens more stories in how to win friends and influence people. The salesman who cracked a deal after 13 years of failure. The impresario who charmed the most temperamental singer in the world. The teacher who turned the worst boy in school into a leader just by telling him he was one. If any of this made you see your own conversations a little differently, the full book will do that 100 times over. It's worth every minute you'll spend with it. But here's the one thought I'd love for you to carry out of here. Tomorrow, you're going to talk to people, your family, a coworker, someone behind a counter who feels invisible. And in each of those moments, you'll have a choice you probably never noticed you were making. You can think about what you want them to know about you, or you can wonder just for a second what they're quietly hungry to feel. One of those paths, Carnegie promised, leads to a lonelier life. The other has the whole world walking beside you. The remarkable thing is, it costs you nothing to choose, and you get to choose again with the very next person you meet.